when you look at the Epstein suicide, right? His brother went on Tucker Carlson and was basically like, dude, Epstein was Jeff, like, he thought he could actually beat this thing. Like, he was not, he was not suicidal. He was not despondent. Yes, he did put up or offered to give the government $500 million, basically all of his wealth, to bail out, right? Just like Diddy. Diddy offered everything he had to the feds, and they still didn't let him walk. They were like, this guy's a flight risk, yada, yada. But at the end of the day, after all of these people came out, all these bodyguards and all these male prostitutes and all these artists and his assistants, everybody said they were willing to testify. Neither of us are legal experts, but he just beat the most serious charges, the RICO charges, and is now effectively just facing time for hiring prostitutes. Even though it looks, they released a ton of footage of Epstein's cell, right, from the Metropolitan Correctional Center, trying to prove, hey, nobody went in there. But it does. I don't know. I think it lacks motive, to be honest with you. What about this Diddy trial did you find surprising? What did you not find surprising? And what does that tell you about the justice system? Like, does this speak to a larger issue in America and with intelligence and with child exploitation or sexual exploitation? What are your thoughts?
So there's a couple of different ways to take the question, and I think they're all really interesting. So first of all, the question of motive in Epstein killing himself is an interesting question. One of the things that I'm actually very blessed to have been able to contribute to is oftentimes when wealthy people are being sent to prison, they'll have a consultation with me and my company, because they kind of want to know what to expect in prison. And they want to know how to build the mental toughness and how to build the resiliency to make it through prison, because prison is hard. It's very, very hard. So I've had a number of opportunities now to sit with very wealthy, very smart, very successful, usually men, almost exclusively men, who then are put and tried and found guilty of white collar crimes, majoritively, that send them to prison for anywhere from 1 year to 4 years. So what I will say people don't understand is that the most brilliant, successful mind in the world, once it lands in that concrete room and your clothes are taken from you and your identity is taken from you, and you are sharing a cell with some actual hardened criminal, and your neighbors are hardened criminals, and you don't know where you fit in this larger ecosystem, the mind changes. I've seen grown men with multiple children with tens of millions of dollars in the bank. I have seen them talk to me on the first day of our consultation and say that they don't even think they're going to live, and say that they're considering killing themselves because it would be better for their family if they just died in prison rather than run their family through the shame of watching the rise and fall of their dad, right? Like, just put yourself in the shoes of somebody who's worth $100 million, and then your kids are going to a private school and your trial has been all over the newspaper. And now for the next 2 years, your kids are going from middle school to high school with the shame of their dad who's in jail for whatever crime. Like, it really weighs on people. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't say that it's without motive, because we don't know what was happening in Epstein's head when he landed in that cold locker, right?
However, Epstein, no family, right? No family.
It's fair. I mean, we have no idea what was going through his head. So I just say that because I'm still torn on what happened to the guy. I'm still torn on whether or not it was organized or it was self-induced or it was premeditated or otherwise. Now, the other part of your question was related to
Diddy.
And what does the Diddy thing teach us?
Yeah.
The first week of the Diddy trial, I was invited to speak on a podcast called Women of Impact with Lisa Bilyeu. And Lisa Bilyeu is a brilliant, business-minded woman. She's got a fantastic podcast. But she was doing this series with a quote-unquote legal expert, a woman who came from the UK, who was part of Scotland Yard, who's changed legal policy related to women in the United States and in the UK. And she was convinced beyond all measure of a doubt that Diddy would be found guilty. She's like, this is a rock solid case. And I have to think that HSI also must have thought they had a rock solid case, because to bring charges as a federal prosecutor, you don't want to lose that case. When you lose that case, you're a laughingstock for the rest of your career. So there were multiple people who thought this was a rock solid case. I said in that first week, I was like, we have to be prepared for Diddy to walk. You have to be prepared for him to get off, because the two charges of sexual trafficking and
Rico.
racketeering, like the conspiracy for racketeering conspiracy, these two charges are super difficult to prove, especially to a jury of peers that are selected by both the prosecution and the defense. So for me, what I think is important here is it shows that our legal system works because it's so hard to find people who truly don't have an opinion about the case, because a jury has to not have an opinion, not have a predisposed opinion. But when you actually bring in people that don't have an opinion, it's very, very hard to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that somebody is guilty. So it really does show that our rights as individuals, our rights to persevere in front of a panel of our peers, are strong, which I think is how our legal system was supposed to work.
I totally agree. There's this quote, I think it's Benjamin Franklin: better that one guilty man should walk. No, better that 100 guilty men should be found innocent than one innocent person found guilty. As a person who hates power and who is totally for what the founding fathers really wanted, which is completely limited government, I am so in agreement with that. Yes, I totally agree. Like he was found guilty in the court of public opinion even before he got arrested, right?
Yep.
And still, you got to prove it. That is the beauty of not the Napoleonic legal system, but what we have, which is, you could probably tell me, it comes from England. What can you tell me? Can't remember.
I'm not quite sure what the actual title is.
But it's essentially, you got to find. I don't have to prove I'm innocent. You just have to find me guilty,
right? And
my peers get to decide. So that's a great take. This actually shows why our legal system, even though it's flawed, just like every legal system, is still probably the best, most fairest in the world.
Exactly. And I say that because anybody who sees the Diddy trial as a failure of the legal system is looking at it the wrong way. The truth is, the Diddy trial is a failure of our judicial system, because the fact that the Department of Justice chose to hold him accountable for certain crimes and failed to prove those crimes, but in the process, they spent how many hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars in legal fees, in investigation, in surveillance, in collection. Like, how much money from our pockets was spent for the DOJ to not take this guy and find him guilty of crime? They could have found other charges. They could have held him accountable to other charges, but instead they chose these very difficult charges and they lost their case. For me, that's the frustrating part, right?
Well, they're political. They're driven by politics. And I think on the heels of the Epstein scandal, I think they were more motivated than ever to try to put Diddy away.
And, it makes sense to me too, because if what Diddy participated in would have been found as precedent for sexual trafficking and racketeering, we would have seen a whole domino set fall next. There would have been professional athletes. There would have been more professional musicians. There would have been more people in the R&B industry. There would have been more people in the movie and entertainment industry. Like, the whole house of cards would have come falling down. had Diddy been guilty of those two charges. But because his defense did this very good job of saying, hey, he's a, but he's not racketeering.
Mm-hmm.
He's a domestic abuser, but he's not a sexual trafficker,
Mm-hmm.
right? They kind of gave the jury um, buckets to put the information in that were predefined by the defense attorney, which was a brilliant move because all people need is some way of organizing information. So when the
Mm-hmm.
defense said, let's organize the information in these buckets, and the prosecution did not, the prosecution was like, hey, one big bucket. Scumbag equals sexual trafficking equals racketeering, which was exactly what many legal experts were saying at the time. They were saying, "Hey, you know, if he engaged in racketeering on two occasions, he's guilty. If he engaged in sexual trafficking on two occasions, he's guilty. We're showing you 50 occasions, but you only need to see it in two before he's guilty." So that just gave everybody one big bucket to kind of throw up in.
Mm-hmm.
But the defense said, no, 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 it's not quite that simple. Here, let's categorize everything and you decide what bucket it goes into. At the end of the day, the jury put most of the stuff in buckets other than trafficking and racketeering.
And what's so ironic is that if the state governments, whether that had been in New York or California, had just taken one or two charges, they could have maybe found him guilty, even though it's hard. It's hard to notoriously hard for prosecutors to get wins, to get guilty verdicts on sex crimes, especially if they happen so long ago, because for various reasons, because the victims don't remember. It's just difficult. But if they had just found him guilty on one or two of the charges that the government was trying to paint as this big mafia conspiracy, they could have given him 40 or 50 years. But instead, the feds came in, and people are so sick of this too. This is my theory, because we talk to a lot of mobsters on this show, and who are telling me about these cases now of these former mob bosses that are walking free from these huge federal trials because the juries are tired of the overreach of the federal government and them putting these huge cases, trying to paint everybody as John Gotti or Pablo Escobar. They're tired of it. And I think this is an example. And look, you have a lot to lose. I don't. Part of me is kind of happy that Diddy beat the, if only as a blow to the overreach of the bureaucracy. Now, of course, I hope he rots in hell, and nobody gets away with anything. But this is why people are celebrating, in my opinion. It's like the O.J. Simpson thing.
CIA believes that all people are born with a spy secret superpower. For some people, that means they can win deals. For others, they can spot liars. Some can even seduce lovers. I built a free 3-minute test to help reveal to you exactly what your secret hidden superpower is. All you have to do is click on the link in the description below, take the test, and start using your spy superpower to stay ahead of 99% of people.
We're tired of the racism from the courts and from the cops. And so, we know he's guilty, but we hate the system more. I think had something to do with it.
The only thing I would say that's different is I wouldn't say Diddy beat anything, right? Diddy did not beat this. Diddy made the decisions that he made. He abused the women he abused. He took advantage of the employees he took advantage of. Like, he made his choices. The whole trial was after the fact, right? It was a judgment of the decisions that he made. So the people who really beat this were his defensive team. And his defense team did the right process in the legal system to get the best jury on the bench for themselves. They did the right thing to frame the information and frame the case as they did. And the prosecution, the federal government, didn't do a good job. So the real war here was between the defense attorneys and the prosecuting attorneys. So Diddy was basically just arm candy for the whole thing. It was his choices in the past that led to the current situation. And I say that because I don't want to celebrate or applaud or make any kind of comment like Diddy had an active role in how this whole thing shaped or how this whole thing turned out. The way this turned out was shaped by the way that our legal system was built and by a defensive team that were masters of their craft more than the prosecuting team were masters of their craft.
Yes. And also you need that consulting money coming in. So Brian, take that part out. Take that part out, dude. This is what happens when you podcast with Johnny Mitchell. I just get wild. Sometimes I regret what I say. Anyways, I don't know why people don't pay me before they go to the joint. I've been to the joint. Pay me, dude. Andy, if you ever get too busy, shoot some of these people off to, you got my number now, and I'll kick you a percentage of what these rich give you.
I know you're making jokes, but the truth is, like, that's exactly how it works. I have not been to jail. So what I do is I bring in ex-cons who have been in jail, and they get a chance to directly consult with my client. That's exactly how it works, which you can imagine why that's sensitive to the client, because rich people don't want to be seen in the same room as an ex-con on their own dime.
Sure. This is an unbelievable reality show idea. You know that. You know that, right?
What's it called? Jail Tomorrow, something like that.
We'll holler at Mark Burnett. I think now that Shark Tank's done,